Hello lovely people, my name is Nicole and it is the end of FemPowerAthon. It ended last night at midnight, at least last night for me when I'm filming this on Monday. But it was quite a productive reading week for me. Like a very productive reading week. I read 10 books. So I'm just gonna jump right into this wrap up because I have a lot of books to talk about and I don't want this video to be like absurdly long. Alright, so I thought I would start off kind of small with my choice for the graphic novel written by women, and for that I chose Lumberjanes Band Together, and that's volume 5. And I really enjoyed this. I love Lumberjanes. They're just consistently fun and funny and so full of hilarious characters in really entertaining situations and great friendship. This particular volume had a little bit less plot pertaining to the overarching series plot, but the sort of individual story that was in this volume was definitely a lot of fun. It had some really good character development. And this volume also contained a story that was a flashback to the girls originally arriving at camp and sort of becoming friends for the first time, which was really fun to see. Next, I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and this was my book for the Read a Book About / by a Woman of Color, and holy shit, this book is incredible. This book deals with some really intense, emotional, difficult topics. The main character is dealing with the fact that her childhood best friend was murdered in an act of police brutality, and so it's a heavy book and it's a hard book to read at times, but I think it is really honest and beautifully written. The characters are all incredibly complex and interesting, well-rounded people. It talks a lot about microaggressions and sort of race relations and where people go right / wrong. You know, the characters aren't perfect in this. Star is scared for a lot of this book, and that prevents her from speaking out a lot. But the way it's written, you know, she's a teenage girl, of course she's scared. She reacts in ways that I feel like are really honest to who she is. I find it difficult to comment on the sort of more general race aspects of this book because I'm white, but from a writing perspective, from a story perspective, this was absolutely beautifully written, and I think that this is a book that our society really needs right now because this issue is really horribly prevalent at the moment. So I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulthurst, and this was my book for both own voices and a LGBT woman. And I loved this. It was first of all, it's a standalone high fantasy, which I feel like you do not see nearly often enough. And second of all, it's a high fantasy with queer characters, which again, you never see. It's great. They don't use the specific terms, which I kind of wish they did, because we're still working on breaking that stigma of using specific identity terms in fantasy, which I find frustrating. Lindsay, the Hufflepuff, actually wrote a really good thread on this that I'll link in the doobly-doo just because it's really interesting. This book was just so much fun and it made me happy, and there were wonderful badass queer girls, and like they were definitely like strong female characters, but they weren't like the sort of stereotypically like they're strong because they're masculine kind of female characters. You know, you had one girl who didn't want to be a princess, she just kind of wanted to ride horses and do her thing. And then you had another girl who, you know, she was fine doing her duty and marrying the person she was betrothed to and being a princess and being a ruler, but she was incredibly intelligent and wanted more responsibility. And these two girls gravitated towards each other and it was beautiful, and the relationship built so well. It wasn't quite like an enemies to lovers kind of thing, but it had that sort of feeling in the beginning. They didn't hate each other, they were just sort of a little antagonistic towards each other. But it had that really good slow build of a relationship, and I thought the magic system, the political drama, just everything in this was so well done, so I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read 3 Dark Crowns by Kendra Blake, and this is a bit of a different kind of fantasy. I read this for my Women in a Position of Power read, and then also for my prominent sister relationship. I don't know if this is maybe the best book for that sister relationship, considering the fact that their relationship with each other mostly consisted of they never knew each other growing up because they were raised separately, and they've been told all their lives that they have to kill each other. So like, it's a prominent sister relationship. It's just not super positive, but this book was awesome. It was so like deliciously dark, and the characters are fascinating because they're sisters, they're triplets, they have so much in common, and yet they were raised in such vastly different communities. Each girl has, you can tell their similarities, they have so many similarities, but they're also so vastly different because of the environments that they were raised in, and this world is amazing and so well developed, and I just like am on the edge of my seat waiting for the next book in the series, which thankfully I only have to wait until September. That's the bonus of waiting to read books after they come out. Anyway, I did call the plot twist at the end though. Did definitely call that one. So I don't think it was like a super crazy plot twist, but I liked it. So I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Under Rose-Tainted Skies by Louise Cornell, and this is about a girl with agoraphobia. And I was a little worried, based on the setup of the book, that it would turn into one of those, you know, a girl with mental illness meets a cute boy, and then all of a sudden she is cured by the force of love kind of things, which is really annoying because like that's not how mental illness works. But I was relieved to see that like that wasn't what happened. I felt like the portrayal of anxiety was portrayed really, really well in this. I can't speak to the agoraphobia part, but the descriptions of panic attacks and anxiety in general felt really accurate to me, at least to what my anxiety is like. And I appreciated that it wasn't just a, she starts going to therapy and all of a sudden everything's cured. She meets a cute boy and falls in love and all of a sudden everything's cured. Like, no, it's hard work, and I feel like that was portrayed really, really accurately. Now, through this entire book, the main character is struggling with this, and she's trying to make progress into getting better, but it's hard, and there's relapses, and you know, shit happens, and mental illness is really hard to deal with. I do want to give a quick trigger warning. There are a few scenes of self-harm in this book, but I think they're portrayed in a way that is very well done. So I gave this 4 stars. Then I read Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller, and this book was so much fun. It's badass pirates, badass lady pirates, just tricking men and screwing the patriarchy and being awesome, and I highly recommend it if you like pirates and feminism. It's great, it's a lot of fun. There were a couple scenes that felt a little dubious consent-y, but I feel like overall it was okay. There were, I do want to give a trigger warning, there were a couple discussions of sexual assault and rape. Nothing graphic, but it did come up a few times. But overall I think this was great. The relationship between the 2 main characters, like I said, felt a little maybe iffy at times just because the position that they're in is that she is a prisoner and he is her captor. And like the setup is that like she intended to be his prisoner, and like she's like secretly has other things going on and like knows that she's gonna be able to escape, and so like it's not really technically a weird power position thing. But there are a few times where it still feels a little, but it did have a really, really good of a real like hate to love relationship, which is always fun. And clearly there's going to be some really good mystery going on that will continue into the next book. So I really enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I started The Forbidden Wish by Jessica Curry, and then I got distracted with Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda movie news, and so I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda again. This is not the first time I've read this book, and this really has nothing to do with FemPowerAthon, other than the fact that it's written by a woman. But it's amazing, and I love it, and I give it 5 stars again, and that's really all I have to say about this. Anyway, and then I went back to The Forbidden Wish by Jessica Curry, and I felt just kinda on this one. I didn't love it. The characters felt kind of one-dimensional, and like they didn't really have any character development. The relationship felt like it went from them being sort of casually friendly, but like she would like constantly roll his eyes at Aladdin's constant womanizing, to oh my god, I love you, you're my soulmate. And it didn't really feel like there was a good build there. So I found it kind of hard to buy into the whole like their loves will save the world kind of plot line. I didn't hate it, I just never really fell in love with the characters or the plot. It just didn't really appeal to me. This was my book for not set in the Western world though, so that did accomplish that challenge. If it hadn't been accomplishing that challenge, I honestly don't know if I would have finished it, but I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read The Careful Undressing of Love by Korean Haidu, and this book is so like weirdly atmospheric. It's a little bit creepy, a little bit eerie. It feels like magical realism. I feel like it reads like magical realism, even though I'm not sure whether or not it technically is. It's one of those books that's a little ambiguous as to whether or not there's actually magic there or whether it's just all in everyone's heads. So I left it just having so many questions, like in the best way. The characters are really, really fascinating. Some of them I felt like could have been a little bit more well-rounded, but all their relationships with each other were interesting and different. I feel like I haven't really read anything like this before. This was one of those books that I can't really put my fingers on what exactly was really, really good about it, but I did really, really like it. I will say that the writing style was absolutely beautiful, very poetic. Yeah, it's just the general atmosphere of this book was, I feel like, the best part about it. So I gave it 5 stars. Then I read If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, and this book, again, this is another one I want to give a quick trigger warning for, because there are some fairly graphic scenes of depression and suicide attempts, as well as some queer bashing kinds of things. I really liked this book. I will say that throughout reading it, I was constantly tense and very sort of mentally preparing myself for something absolutely horrific to happen. And I hate that I get like that, and I hate that I'm automatically preparing myself for something horrible to happen when I'm reading these kinds of narratives. Because, like, I shouldn't have to be. That shouldn't be such a common trope for, you know, whenever there's a trans character, someone finds out and they almost get murdered. That's a horrible trope to have, but it's so common and I hate it. Unfortunately, it's a trope for a reason, and that reason is that it's way too common in our world. But it's just, it's something that, like, I know why it's so common and I hate that it's so common. But luckily this one didn't get too bad when it came to that. I also really appreciated the author had an author's note at the end that talked about how the main character in this book had a lot of privileges that most trans girls her age wouldn't have. You know, she was able to get surgery, she was able to get hormones, she's very conventionally attractive and passes really, really easily. And those aren't all that common when it comes to real life trans girls, and she wrote it that way for a very specific reason, in order to, I want to say, make this story easier for cis people and people who aren't as aware of the community to understand and digest and to accept. And this is another thing that, like, I hate that she had to do this. I also get it, and I get that her purpose with this book was in part to, you know, provide a representation to trans people, but also to educate people who aren't as well educated, who aren't as aware, which makes sense that she would take those sort of artistic liberties. So I have mixed feelings about that, but overall the writing was good. It wasn't, like, mind-blowing, but it was good. The story was good. The sort of story arc, again, like I said, I was very tense for a lot of it, but it made sense. The characters' development all made sense. Like, all of those little puzzle pieces fit together well. The main, I think, standout thing of this book is that it's good trans representation, and I think that's the most important thing about this book, because just as a story of its own, it's good. It's not amazing, but it's good. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. And then the last book I read for the FemPowerAthon was The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis, and this is another kind of intense read. It's for sort of a different reason, but this one, first of all, trigger warning, there's a lot of discussion of sexual assault in this. It's sort of a punching the patriarchy in the face kind of thing, but it does get kind of intense at times. And it also gets fairly graphic violently. But overall, I think that this story was really good. It was, like I said, intense, but the main character was one of those people who you're rooting for them, and, like, they're not the most moral person. She's sort of doing bad things for a good cause kind of thing, but her reason behind hurting people was good enough that, like, I was rooting for her. And, like, her main relationship in this was so beautifully developed and just all the three main characters that we had were really, really interesting and felt like three very unique points of view. They were all so different from one another, but they all like pieced together wonderfully. It didn't like blow me away. It's not something that I think I will be like constantly reaching for and thinking about for the next few years, but I do think it is really good and it is kind of a kick-ass feminist read. There are a couple moments that felt a little bit preachy, but also a couple moments that were technically kind of preachy, but like didn't read that way, so it was kind of a mix. But overall, I did enjoy it, and I did really like it, so I gave it 4 stars. Alright, those are all the books I read for FemPowerAthon. Let me know if you guys read anything for FemPowerAthon this week. In the comments, let me know if you guys had fun. Taylor and I have been making plans for round 2 already, so it should be fun. I hope you guys had fun this week. I definitely did. I love you guys, and I will see you later.